won't see you next week though, because next week we'll have our terrorism conference. I hope all of you have RSVP'd or will attend. I think that what the new administration needs to know about terrorism and counterterrorism next week will be a good. And if you can't make it, we will be live streaming it, and it will be recorded as we're recording here, so you'll be able to see it after we post it. Well, we're very fortunate to have Jason Meyer with us today. He's with the Chertoff Group, but most importantly to all of you is he's an alum of SSP. And so he gets to show you what life is like after SSP. And he's had a very distinguished career since he graduated from SSP in 2002. And he was only 16 when he graduated, though.
That's true.
And but he's had a very distinguished career working in the Central Intelligence Agency and various other intelligence, NSA, NCTC, and at the White House. And so he's had a very, very successful career in government, but more importantly, I think, also outside the government. And using his education and the skills he's developed in and out of the intelligence community, he's going to be able to give us some insights on different kinds of careers that are available out there. We tend to think about intelligence as only the Central Intelligence Agency or the other 16 agencies in the intelligence community, but there's a lot of application, a lot of need for the skills and the education, the critical analysis that goes into being an intelligence professional. And so I think he'll be able to give us some insights. He is not the only SSP alum at the Chertoff Group. Kelly McCraven, Josh Forget, Nick, Andre Nicola, and last year, after he spoke last year, they hired an SSP student, Mike Sexton.
Right after this presentation.
Yeah, so I know that's why you're all here to.
And I got a referral bonus.
Yeah. So no promises, but on a very, very serious note, this is what right looks like. This is what the future for all of you can look like. And so, and most importantly, he is here to pass on his experience and his wisdom, because of course we all make mistakes. Intelligent people learn from the mistakes of others, and wise people, or intelligent people learn from their mistakes, and wise people learn from the mistakes of others.
That's right.
But we really want to learn from the success, and so that's what we're going to hear from Jason today. So, without further ado, Jason, it's all yours.
That's a kind introduction. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. I love coming back. I was here almost exactly a year ago, which made changing the title slide quite easy. So I wanted to first start off with a question, which is, I assume that a lot of you, if not all of you, have interest in having a government career. And so wondering, just by a show of hands, I assume that's almost everybody? In some form or fashion? Cool. And politics notwithstanding, wondering after the election this year, how many of you sort of had second thoughts? Politics notwithstanding. Thinking about something else maybe. Yeah. So you're not alone. A lot of folks who are interested in getting into government, or perhaps indeed are in government, have taken a moment of pause. A lot of things coming out of the campaign, have been, inflammatory, and so I think people are concerned about sort of what's to come. And you have a lot of government servants who've been in for a number of years who are thinking about sort of what's next for them. And I've had a series of stints at different intelligence components, shorter than I would have wanted them to be, all for sort of different reasons, but it's been interesting to be on the outside now, looking back in, and having a lot of friends of mine, folks who are in my class at the agency and other places, who are looking to get out of government now and trying to figure out what's next. And so just in general, there's a lot you can do in the security field beyond just being an intelligence officer. I mean, first and foremost, CIA, as sort of the watchword of the community, has a whole lot of different things you can do, right? There's science, technology, there's research, there's analysis, there's operations, there's management, there's all these other things that the agency does. And so the idea of, I want to come to SSP and then I want to become a spy, become a spook, it's really one of many, many, many paths. I hope to impress upon you that there's lots of interesting things beyond just that path. The community, as you saw when the intelligence chiefs went up to brief the president-elect last week and all that sort of kerfuffle that came out of that briefing, but the DNI was there, the FBI director was there, the NSA director was there, and the CIA director. only 4 of 17 intelligence components. And I know you guys are sort of well-versed in the basics of the community, so I'm not going to spend time on that, but there's a whole lot of really good stuff out there, a whole lot of really good and interesting work beyond just intelligence. So again, I've had a lot of really interesting experiences, and I hope to share some of those with you. So I want to talk first a little bit about sort of what the Chertoff Group is and what we do, just to give you a little context around sort of who I am and kind of where I sit and kind of how I come into this. So we're a global security and risk management advisory firm, which doesn't really mean anything to anybody, but what that basically means is we help companies, and sometimes governments, but mostly companies, manage their risk, protect their stuff. We help them protect their data, protect their networks, protect their people, and protect their facilities. In sort of no particular order, right? So we have 4 practice areas, and I'll get into the nuts and bolts of the firm later, but for the purpose of this conversation, what I do is help companies on the sort of physical or non-cyber side of the equation. As we move more and more toward an age of the Internet of Things and technology is everywhere and integrated into everything, there's almost no way anymore to separate protecting the physical world from protecting the logical world, right? I mean, think about a stadium, right, or an oil refinery with cameras and sensors around to protect it from people coming in. Those things are all networked to the internet, right? So by the very fact of putting up a physical security system, you're creating a cybersecurity vulnerability. So we talk to our clients about what we call converged security, so how to protect your stuff. As I said up here, I mean, for me, this job is kind of the culmination of some good choices, some bad ones, and some happenstance. And as you'll see as you get on in your careers, how true that statement is. You'll end up somewhere and be like, well, how the hell did I get here? And some of it's because you were really deliberate in your planning, but more often than not, you had a coffee with your friends, best friends, dogs, trainers, former roommate, and then all of a sudden, like, oh my God, the Department of Energy has an intelligence component? I had no idea. That's cool. And that's where you end up, right? Like, that happens all the time, especially in Washington. From my government days, the things I missed the most, the mission, the people, and the access, probably in that order. Getting up every day and knowing you have a hill to take, if you will, using the military parlance, but you have an op, you have something you have to sort of get done, and it helps the country, you feel like you're actually making a meaningful contribution, is amazing. But as I've come to find out in the private sector, there's actually quite a bit of service you can do without having to be a government employee. And so I really want to foot stomp that. I didn't know it until I got to the Chertoff Group. My job is to help U.S. companies protect their people in frontier markets. That's what I do for a living. That's pretty cool. Like, you don't have to be a CIA operative to get to do something like that, where you're actually doing service. The people are amazing, and I remember so vividly walking across the Star the last time. Like, I actually cried in the lobby of the building. It was quite sad, but I don't miss the bureaucracy, the politics, and the inflexibility. I work for a company with 50 people. When I have an idea for a new business development opportunity, I walk into the CEO's office and say, I have an idea for a new business development opportunity. Like, that doesn't happen in the government, right? Like, I have the opportunity to talk to Secretary Chertoff or Michael Hayden, who's the former CIA director, and sit and sort of shoot the breeze with them. And okay, like, what do we want to do? We represent 2 of the big U.S. Air carriers, and they come in every quarter for what we call our kind of quarterly intelligence briefing. But really, what it is sort of a global survey of what's going on in the world as it pertains to sort of U.S. national security and civil aviation. So we'll talk about overflights in Syria. We'll talk about stuff in Ukraine last year, Korea, sort of ISIS, whatever. But like, we're helping a U.S. airline. I mean, if there's anything sort of more symbolic for terrorists and airlines, right? So helping protect U.S. pilots and passengers, like, that feels pretty good. It's pretty cool. So just a quick overview of our firm. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because it's a little mind-numbing. Basically, we do sort of 4 things. So this is me. We do strategy consulting, which basically means helping companies grow. We have an office in Menlo Park, and sort of deep reaches into the tech community there, helping companies that have some sort of whiz-bang something to sell to the U.S. government to sort of build those relationships and establish channel partners. M&A advisory, so we do buy-side and sell-side M&A, and private equity. We just started our own private equity fund about a year ago. We've made 5 strategic investments and bought 2 companies that are now Chertoff Group companies. So we call it the full life cycle advisory model. So you think about a small company that has some sort of data analytics service, right, or some sort of technology. We will help them to grow, to hopefully get access to the U.S. intelligence community or the Homeland Security Committee or DoD or whatever. And then over time, as that company grows, they have their own security needs, right? So they'll bring in folks like me, who's sort of the security guy, to help them think through protecting their own stuff, protecting their own data, protecting their own people as they grow. And then when they're ready to bolt on an acquisition or to potentially to exit, we sort of pass them over to the M&A guys. These are like services that don't seem to actually fit together, but they actually do quite nicely. And more importantly for us, when you have things like sequestration or market downturns, or this year was a terrible year in the M&A market, it just was for a variety of reasons, but we can sort of survive that because we have other parts of the company that are doing other things, right, in different markets. So headquartered here in DC, we have small footprints in New York, London, Houston, and then we have an office in Menlo Park, which is about 5 folks. And these are really sort of where we focus: tech and cyber, government services, and energy and critical infrastructure. I spend most of my time in this box. Critical infrastructure is a pretty loosely defined term. I mean, for me, it's everything including stadiums and arenas, oil refineries, electric utilities, even sort of major high-rises, that sort of thing. So companies bring us in to help them figure out how to protect their stuff. And just sort of more on, and I can send these slides to you guys if you're interested in reading more, but I'm not going to sort of bore you with it. But that's sort of the 4 practice areas. In the security services bin, which is where I sit, right, we do some cyber stuff and some physical stuff. And we try to organize it around assessing risk, mitigating risk, and monitoring risk, right? And this is where folks tend to fall down. So they'll bring in a consultant to say, can you do a threat assessment against our company? What are people saying about us on the internet? Here's our footprint. We have a factory in Lagos, and we have one in Abuja, and we have one in, I don't know, whatever, Rawalpindi. And so give us a sense of what is the threat picture that we face. We want to send American expats or British expats to these places. What do we need to think about? Whether it's terrorism, whether it's local crime, whether it's drug trafficking, whatever. And then put together sort of a security strategy that is reflective of that threat picture. And then that's the mitigation part. So they'll say, okay, what is the technology we need to put in place to protect us? What are the strategies we need? What is the sort of incident response and crisis management plans we need to have in place if something goes wrong? If we need to evacuate 100 people from an embassy or 100 people from a refinery, how do we do that? What kinds of relationships do we need to have in place with providers on the ground to react to a situation when it happens? And then training and exercise. We spend a lot of our time developing tabletops, delivering tabletops to companies. It's a sort of funny aside. I did one about 2-3 years ago. You guys know, a big media company and technology company, and they send reporters all over the world to gather information. So we did a tabletop wherein and she was held for ransom, $10 million, whatever it was. So we lay out the scenario. So we have the CEO and a bunch of the senior folks in the room, general counsel, EVP of HR. And so they get their heads together. We leave the room. They spend 45 minutes talking about, okay, how are we going to deal with this? What do we do? And we come back in the room. So we come back in the room, and they say, okay, we have this great communication strategy. Okay, the people on the ground are going to do this, and they're going to talk to this person in London, and the London folks are going to talk to us in New York, and we're going to keep these people informed. And I have a pre-stage email to the media and all this stuff. And they go on and on. About 20 minutes later, my teammate raises his hand and says, "You haven't saved the woman yet." They were like, oh. So it's pretty funny. Corporations tend to think in very sort of bureaucratic and process terms. No one would have thought about actually saving this poor woman who was theoretically in some back of some muffler shop in Russia. But anyway, it's pretty funny. And then monitoring risk. And again, like, this is where stuff falls down. People will pay a lot of money. I mean, the Saudis a couple years ago deployed this ridiculously expensive border security program technology, and had no idea how to run the thing. Had not thought about operation and maintenance. Had not thought about making sure the thing actually worked, and how to audit the fact that stuff was. I mean, there's cameras out all over the place, and they didn't even notice. So we spent a lot of time sort of talking to boards about how to manage risk, how to monitor risk, how to keep the things working that are supposed to work, and then sort of running simulations and penetration tests and so on. And it's the same thing on the cyber side and the physical side, right? Security is security. You're just protecting stuff. And any sophisticated actor worth his salt or his or her salt, right? They don't care how they get into your stuff. They're just going to get in, right? If they want to knock out an electric utility grid, whether they shoot up a transformer or they knock out the industrial control system, what does it matter, right? If they're smart enough, they're going to find out whatever way in. So we tend to bring these kind of converged thoughts to our clients. So that's sort of it for the Chertoff Group. I didn't want to go too deep, but happy to answer any questions about sort of who we are and what we do before I move on. Anything you want? jobs for you guys?
Oh, wait.
Just kidding. Okay. Actually, funny. I'm really pissed about the inauguration because I couldn't get to my office to get free business cards. I couldn't get to the building because we're like in the zone. So I'll leave you guys my contact information. Anyway, so I spent some of my time with CFR. I'm a term member at CFR, and I pulled this from their stuff. I just wanted to show it to you relative to sort of the way that we think about it. Sort of high, we always talk about risk in terms of sort of probability and consequence or impact, right? So think about it, I wish I had a whiteboard. Basically, if you think about, let me do it this way, right? Low to high, right? Probability and severity. So sort of thinking about where to put a risk, right? So terrorism, high probability, really low impact, right? We're not worried about a strategic attack in the United States anymore the way we were 15 years ago, right? Cyber, high probability, high consequence. Sort of thinking about sort of where to put things and how to bin them, and that's really the essence of risk management is how do you prioritize? I mean, you can't defend against everything, right? Companies and governments have limited resources and limited people they can throw at these things, so what are the highest consequence? What is sort of high and to the right? What is sort of high probability and high impact for your organization, and how do you sort of focus your resources on that stuff? So I think we've all seen the news over the last 6 weeks, right? So Russia, right? North Korea, cyber, and a mass casualty terrorist attack, and we can define mass casualty differently, but another Orlando or another Paris-style attack on U.S. soil would be a game changer to some degree. Although again, it's not a strategic threat anymore, in my opinion. It's just highly politicized. And then more on the sort of the moderate side, Afghanistan, if things continue to sort of go downhill there, Turkey, which is obviously a mess, and then Syria. Anybody here have sort of a disagreement with that, with CFR's analysis? You see the world differently? Or anything missing on that list? China's not up there. So we put this together in the middle of last year. I think it's still fairly on point. Thinking about when we get sort of 5 years on, what are the things that are going to be kind of going from present to sort of the out years, right? That are going to be the focus for us. Terrorism will continue to be an issue, but again, perhaps a lower level one, and sort of the size of the bubble here is perhaps the importance of the issue, right? Cyber, Russia, and maybe the Russia bubble gets bigger now. China, and then this one is interesting, right? Sort of arguments over natural resources. I mean, that stuff's coming, right? These oil is going to run out at some point. There's going to be water issues in the Middle East. It's already happening now. And then we did this sort of before the migrant crisis. That was the migrant crisis. There are tectonic shifts happening in the world, and I know you guys follow this really closely, and so. Sort of getting beyond thinking about ISIS and thinking about Al-Qaeda and some of the other things that are happening in the world, and finding opportunities to work in and around government on issues that are, again, beyond terrorism is a really good thing. If I was sitting in your seat, I would go out and start taking Korean. If I wanted to be an intelligence officer, that's what I would do. The next war is going to be on the Korean Peninsula, in my opinion.
Come and talk to me. How much will we have?
Yeah.
I will
Yeah, I really believe that. I mean, 5 years ago, I would have said Farsi. I mean, I don't think Iran's going anywhere, but the next war to me is going to be on the Korean Peninsula. I mean, you watch the trend lines, you sort of pick, I'll see in just 1 second, you sort of watch what's going on behind the scenes, and things sort of drip out and drip out and drip out. It's getting bad, and I think it's some degree inevitable. Yeah.
Where does climate change fall on that graph?
Yeah, good one. I mean, I guess it probably. It's a good question. Yeah, I mean, we didn't do it there because. Most of our clients, most of the companies aren't worried about it in the way the governments are. So this is really built for corporations, but it's coming.
But it certainly impacts natural resources. I mean, China has big. I mean, all the countries have impacts on it, and I just to say climate change would be more of an integrated issue, I think, rather than a single single focus issue.
Yeah, and we'll see what happens with the Paris Agreement, right? Whether or not the Trump administration decides to follow through or to walk away, and I think the signals have been, probably pretty negative as to whether they're going to stick with it. But I don't know if anybody caught this, but President Xi spoke at Davos. Did you guys see this a couple days ago? Gave what one might describe as the American speech, I mean, talking about globalization and terrorism and national security and the importance of working together, and that's the speech the American president's supposed to give. And so the fact that the communist, I just thought that was kind of mind-blowing. The world is changing quite right. Yeah.
So, looking at these rankings and also the magnitude that you assign to each threat up there,
Yeah.
how do you differentiate in your analysis, like, because you're doing this for corporates instead of for governments, like what changes in the analysis of the risks?
Yeah, I mean, some of them I think are exactly the same. I mean, it depends on who the company is and where they're operating, right? Like, it shifts around depending on who it is. I mean, some of the folks we talk to are, who are like energy companies, right, are really concerned about what's going on in the country in which they operate, and some of this, like China doesn't necessarily enter into the picture. But for a company like Bloomberg, or a company, that we have a client now that's a big entertainment company, they put on sort of live shows all over the world. So they're really concerned about, terrorism principally, right? Somebody walking into a stadium and shooting people, right? So we sort of move the boxes around depending on who we're talking to. But for your sort of, again, your like stock garden variety American multinational, it's not that different. Yeah.
So if you're giving cyber and nuclear proliferation their own circles there,
Yeah.
Russia and China, those circles for Russia and China, is that meant to represent like conventional conflict at risk?
Yeah, I mean, right. It's the right question. These things all bleed over into one another, and there's state-sponsored terrorism, and Iran isn't on the list. And you could put it under terrorism. I don't know, but yeah, it's sort of it's just one person's depiction. But yes, like it all bleeds over into one another. So sort of a similar type graphic. This was about sort of the sort of immediate threat versus budget allocation. We were trying to help companies think through like where do you want to put your money, right? So the same list of actors. Iran's on this one. So let you sort of take a look for a minute. Peace isn't breaking out anytime soon. What is interesting, I think, there's a lot of people I think that are concerned about, given the rhetoric coming out of the Chinese government and the transition team, about what's going to happen with China in the first 6 months of the administration. And some people believe there's a war coming. I don't really see it that way. I think when you're talking about sort of two nuclear powers who have a lot of intertwined interests, I don't think it's in anybody's interest to go to war with one another. But I do think you're going to see very quickly, maybe as early as next week, some statements out of the White House that are inflammatory towards China. I mean, they may declare them a currency manipulator right off the bat. I mean, there's going to be stuff that goes on. There's sort of hot war and cold war, and I think with China things are about to get bad very quickly. But I wouldn't be concerned that there's going to be
And trade war.
a trade war. Yeah. And it's interesting, right? The president-elect, has particular issues that he's sort of more passionate about, I think, than others. And so my view is that you'll see him take a very active role in trade, right, and a very active role in things like immigration, but perhaps leaving some of the other issues to other folks, right? That he's not necessarily going to get directly involved with some of the Middle East sort of security stuff. I don't know. It's hard to say. He just doesn't talk about it very much. So you assume that. I mean, I think Mattis is great. I think he's hired some good people. I was pleasantly surprised with some of the choices. So hopefully he'll leave some of that stuff to the experts, because obviously that's not his background. So just some more trend lines. And again, I don't want to spend too much time on just sort of going through minutiae. I really want to spend the time talking to you guys and getting your thoughts on sort of what you want to do and what you're interested in. So let me just skip through this. So these are meant to be humorous, so take them for what they are. But I believe them. So you can't make a big mistake in your 20s. You just can't, career-wise. No matter what you go and do, no matter where you work, no matter how much you hate it, no matter how awful your boss is to you, it's still good. It's still worth your time. You're going to learn a lot about yourself. You're going to learn about what you don't want to do as much as what you do want to do, which is as important. My first job was working for a public relations firm in New York, which has absolutely nothing to do with anything that I do, right? Just, it's fine. But you will make small ones that will be invaluable to you later. You're going to take a job that you find out really quickly is not for you. You're going to screw up on a project. You're going to oversleep your alarm and miss a presentation. It's just going to happen. And like give yourselves a break, right? Like nobody expects people in their 20s and their early 30s to be perfect. You'll get there, but like let the game come to you. be honest with yourself. What you need and what you want are not always the same. When I was at CIA, I had convinced myself that I was a public service person. I am a public servant. That is who I am, and that is what I do. And then I got out, and I was like, oh, okay, cool. Like, there's other stuff you can do and be fulfilled and be happy. And certainly you have to do it thoughtfully and carefully in terms of what you can do in the private sector. But then, I didn't realize that I could do something else and be happy, right? I thought I needed that. And so it's okay to be honest with yourself as you, like, I don't have to be, the guy sort of taking the hill first to feel self-important, right? Think about your career inductively. So the way that when I talk to folks about career planning, rather than saying, I want to work at the FBI, and then I will figure out what I can do with the FBI after, I say, what do I want to do all day? And again, like, open your mind, like, open the aperture. Do I want to spend my day, generally speaking, right, behind a desk, behind a computer? Is that, doing research or writing or whatever? Do I want to spend my day out, hobnobbing, going to long martini lunches and schmoozing people and building business and, and sort of selling things, right? Do I want to spend my day, do I want to be traveling all the time? Do I like going out and seeing the world and being on the road and understanding the cost it has in my personal life? Do I want to be up in front of people giving presentations a lot? Do I enjoy public speaking? Whatever. Like start with that. Start with what do you enjoy doing? Because you have to do it every day. Like, it's 40 plus, 50 plus hours a week of your life. What do you want to actually do? And then, okay, what organizations or what types of organizations like have that function in them, right? And then what are the actual organizations that do that? And then which are the ones that make the most sense for me and where I want to live and what fits into my lifestyle? Like, don't start up here. Start down here. The money will come, but not fall out of the sky. When I was 24, I got offered a job at CIA as an analyst. So I ended up on the operational side about 5 or 6 years later, but I got a job as an analyst and turned it down to go work at Booz Allen. The money was a chunk better, maybe 25% better, I don't remember exactly, but I was like, man, like, that makes a big difference in my life right now. I really want that stereo, or whatever it is that I wanted. And so I took the money. I'm like, oh, I can get government service later on if I want to. I thought that was a big mistake in retrospect. The money will come. Spend your time in your 20s skill building. Like, become a great writer, right? Become a really good researcher. Figure out how to go get stuff. Build your network. Spend your time with people. Do some service. Like, go to the Peace Corps. Go to the U.S. government. Go to AmeriCorps. I was an AmeriCorps guy. Like, go do some good. Go do some good. Learn a language. Learn 2 languages. Go overseas for a couple years. Teach English. Go get immersed in another culture. You're talking about on the back end. If I'm a recruiter or an HR manager at the agency, like, that's what I'm looking for. Technology, travel, language. That's what they want, right? Education is great, test scores are great, grades are great. Technology, travel, language. That's what they need. And so the money, but the money's not going to fall out of the sky. So I don't want to intimate that you go to the government, work 5 or 7 years, and then all of a sudden someone's there waiting for with a big publisher's clearinghouse check. Like, it doesn't work like that. Like, you have to work for it. And I have a lot of case officers coming to me, friends of mine, saying, I have no human skills. Like, I know how to recruit spies in alleys in Uzbekistan. Like, what is a company going to do with me? Like, I don't know how to do anything, right? And it's like, it's a joke, but it's not a joke, right? These people are terrified. These people have, like, the job that many people in this room would love to have, right? And have no idea what to do with it once they leave. And unfortunately for you, and to some extent for me, the sort of wartime CIA doesn't exist anymore. So the notion of going in and going out to Iraq and then going to Pakistan and hunting terrorists and pointing drones at things, that CIA is in our rearview mirror. They still do some of that at CTC, but really the organization is moving and has moved much towards the sort of longer term threat and warning that it was traditionally supposed to be. DoD should be pointing and shooting, right? That's not supposed to be traditionally what CIA did. Yes, it came out of a paramilitary sort of beginning, but that's not the purpose of the organization. And so just keep that in mind, that the intelligence community is moving back towards where it was supposed to be in the first place, away from the sort of post-9/11 surge and hiring 20-somethings who want to go point and shoot. So, I'll leave it at that. Who you know matters more than what you know until someone asks you a question, right? So I'm a networking fanatic, and not that I'm the best networker out there, but I take it seriously because it's an opportunity not only to sort of help yourself and improve your own sort of professional standing, but it's a chance to help other people too. And if you don't think of networking as a two-way street, as a way to help other people and help your peers, these are your peers, guys. These are the people you're going to be running into, maybe literally, but mostly figuratively, for the rest of your lives and your careers. So like, take it seriously. Spend the time, get to know each other, figure out what other people want to do, and see how you can help them. There's no better way to build a friend, right, than doing something nice. Until someone asks you a question. That doesn't mean you don't learn stuff, right? It's embarrassing to be in an interview and be asked a content question that you should know the answer to when you got the interview because of a connection and you sort of worked it and you did this great thing to get you in this position and you can't answer the question. And you're like, well, that sucks. Make yourself invaluable to someone and then look around you and do it again. So this was my experience at work. So I worked for John Brennan, who's the CIA director, outgoing CIA director in the private sector before I worked for him at the NSC. So he was the CEO of this company. I was his sort of aide-de-camp, and we worked together for a year and a half. And then President-elect Obama asked him to come join the transition team and run the intelligence community transition. And so we said, okay, I'm out. I'm like this. My title is like senior advisor to the CEO. We now have no CEO. So he's gone for 3 months. As I'll see you in January, February, and of course he gets the job as Homeland Security Advisor, Counterterrorism Advisor. So he never comes back. So I'm the senior advisor to the CEO that we don't have, and I hadn't spent any time or effort sort of recruiting anybody else senior at our company to reattach myself to anyone. So I had to leave. I had no job. I was advising someone that didn't exist, and so making yourself invaluable is a great thing, right? Anytime you get to a job, figure out who the important people are and make yourself invaluable. Find a way to do things. My stepfather is sort of wise old guy, and he has this saying: successful people are the people willing to do the things that unsuccessful people aren't willing to do. You need someone to sweep the floor, to go get the coffee, to set up lunch. Ain't none of us above it doing any of that stuff, right? And so that's been a creed for me throughout my career. Like, I will find the things that nobody wants to do and just do it. Just do it. And over time, you become invaluable to the people that you work for because they rely on you as the person that will just get something done. Like, you're not gonna pull title. You're not gonna say that's somebody else's job. You're not gonna go get an intern. You're just gonna do it. And that stuff sort of appreciates over time and accrues over time. Embrace your inner millennial while emulating the greatest generation. So anymore, nobody has one job throughout their career, right? We don't all sort of pick up our lunch box and go to work at the same factory and come home 30 years later with grandkids on the way, right? Nobody works like that anymore. So moving around in your career, having a bunch of different experiences is great. It's good. That doesn't mean that you should go to a job and after a year say, my boss wasn't nice to me, I'm going to start sending out resumes. That's not what that means. I've tried to counsel people to take the long view without taking the really long view, right? And I've had this experience myself. I had a couple of really short stints at jobs and regretted it because I felt like yes, the situation was bad, and yes, I wanted to leave, and yes, it made sense to leave, but in the long run, you will have more self-respect, and people will respect you more if you sort of stick it out through the hard times and spend a little time. Like, if you're going to be at a job anyway, you might as well get something out of it, right? So staying there just long enough to use that to go somewhere else is just sort of a waste of everybody's time. And as I said, network your ass off everywhere you go. At school, at work, at a bar, at the dentist, on a train, at Thanksgiving dinner. Just don't be obvious about it, right? Like, nobody likes a gunner. No one likes somebody who's clearly talking to them only so they can sort of, what's the word I'm looking for, so they can to improve themselves, right? So to get something out of it selfishly. Find ways to help other people. Find ways to help each other. We stop there and too much. Yeah.
Thank you for coming in to speak with us today. I really found your presentation to be very informative.
Thank you.
So I thank you for that. I know you have a background as an intelligence officer with the CIA, and I was wondering if you could compare that skill set that you learned there to your policy-making skill set at the National Security Council as a staffer.
Yeah, so most folks, this is sort of an obtuse answer, but most folks, the NSC is largely made up of detailees, right? Most folks are not direct hires. Because I had a relationship with John Brennan, he hired me directly, so I was an appointee. So I came out of the private sector and sort of to work for him, and so I didn't have any sort of human skills, right? My job was to just make his life easier, whatever that meant, right? Reading memos before they went up to him, doing a little bit of speech writing, sitting in meetings, making sure the stuff got followed up on, just your kind of general staff officer stuff. Most folks at the NSC have, 8 years at CIA, 10 years at FBI, 12 years at Secret Service, 13 years at Energy, whatever. And those the subject matter experts in their field are the ones that are pulled to spend a year or two sort of serving at the president's pleasure. So the skills really don't relate to one another, other than so I went to law school, so like being a law student, being an intelligence officer, learning how to taking large amounts of data and distilling it down to small amounts of data in digestible form for policymakers, that's the skill, right? Being able to have a meeting with somebody and come back with 2 or 3 bullets that they need to know, because these guys don't have time for half a page or a page or 2 pages. You know, give me what I need to know and I'm moving on to my next meeting. I remember so vividly, and we'd be in meetings 15, 16 hours a day. I mean, we do 2 hours, deputy committee's meeting on Pakistan, 15-minute break. Deputy committee meeting in Afghanistan. Then we go to cybersecurity. Then Yemen. Then Somalia, all day long. And so you're John or you're Tom Donnellan or Steve Hadley or any of these guys running these meetings. You don't have a whole lot of time to prepare, and you're the guy that's in charge of making the decision and then making a recommendation to the president. And so, as a staff officer, your job is to like tell me what I need to know. Don't tell me any more. Don't tell me any less, and make sure that whatever gets agreed upon in the meeting is followed up on and taken care of, so I don't have to think about it. So, sort of an obtuse answer. They're not really that related, but it's all about like taking this and bringing it down to this and handing it to me in sort of adjustable form.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So also thank you for your presentation.
No.
It's nice to see SSP alum, so that kind of encourages.
Reinforcing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
very
yeah,
much
good.
so. I was wondering, with your background in law, how does that kind of come into the experiences you've had? Have you worked also as general counsel that advises on legal issues, or is it mostly sort of on what can and cannot be done?
Yeah, it's a great question. So when this is sort of a cautionary tale. So I came down to DC right after 9/11 and did SSP, and then rolled right into law school right like a week later after I finished SSP, which was insane. But I mean, I was trying to do sort of a dual degree program. I couldn't figure out how to do it, so I just did them kind of like right in a row. Because I wasn't sure what I wanted to be yet. I wasn't sure that a master's was going to be enough for. Like, I wanted to keep opening up more doors. I wasn't sure, do I want to do intelligence or law enforcement or policy making or work on the Hill? I just didn't know yet. So I said, okay, I'm going to sort of keep going, keep opening up doors, keep meeting new people, keep learning, keep skill building at the cost of $200,000. So paying off the loans instead. So sad.
Money doesn't fall out of the sky.
Yeah. So I'll get back to that in a second, but on the money side. But anyway, so I went to law school. Realized after 2 weeks that it sucked and I hated it. But stuck it out and got through and took the bar and whatever. I wouldn't have gotten the job at the White House without it. John wanted somebody who had a little bit more gravitas. He wasn't going to bring in a 23-year-old to do that job. So I'm glad I did it. It helped me get jobs, but I've never really used it. At the Chertoff Group, occasionally they'll ask me to review a contract. We get into an agreement with a client. They'll say, "Can you take a look at this and make sure it's not crazy?" Or review a non-disclosure agreement or something. That's really it. It's kind of sad. $200,000. It's under my couch. Yeah.
Can you talk about how you see this conflict with Korea going, especially with testing ICBM or claiming that they're going to all these other things that are going on?
Yeah, look, nobody knows. Nobody knows what's going on. Nobody knows how it's going to play out. But I'm really concerned that the president-elect is going to be tested early and often. People are going to want to see what he's made of. Whether or not he is able to respond to crises sort of thoughtfully, carefully, deliberately, rather than being reactive. I know he's been reactive often on Twitter and some of these things, but who knows whether or not that's pre-inauguration. I'm trying to take the optimistic view, right? That hopefully, that once he gets into the chair and is in that weird-looking room, that his sort of attitude about all that changes. But you're talking about an irrational actor in Korea. Most of the actors we're talking about around the world, even Putin, are highly rational, and they have a lot to lose. And that's why I'm not that worried about China becoming a real conflagration, because these guys have a lot to lose. They have kids too, right? But Kim Jong-un is not a rational actor. I mean, he's with some regularity axing his own staff, right? Anyone that he perceives as a threat to him. And again, the sort of the frequency of now we're testing this, now we're looking at it. It's just the trend is not good, and I'm worried about the combination of a reactive administration and an irrational actor on it. Yeah.
Going at that point, you mentioned that 5 years ago Iran might have been a more bigger security threat.
Yeah.
Do you think that just in the post-nuclear deal they've sort of tempered down a little bit, or is it just that other actors like Russia and China and Korea have gotten more dangerous?
Yeah, not mutually exclusive, right? I mean, Iran continues to be a significant threat, and I think Flynn is sort of an Iranist, right? Flynn, that he believes, I think, is the #1 threat to the United States, and I don't necessarily disagree with that as a matter of kind of like hard security, right? Terrorism, and they send people all around the world and do bad things, and I'm no fan of the Iranians, but there are a lot of priorities, and if it was me starting out and sort of seeing what's going to be next, because there are a lot of folks who went to Farsi. Right. I'm just talking about it as a prospective employee of an intelligence or security agency. There's just not nearly enough Korean people. There's not. Yeah.
So I think a common issue for SSP graduates, even undergraduates here at Georgetown, is they get an offer for a government job and they get caught in the clearance process that seems to take forever.
Yeah.
They get this awkward point where you have an offer on the table that may be accepted.
Yeah.
You're asked to kind of sit on your hands.
Yeah.
Beyond the advice you've kind of given generally right now,
Yeah.
do you have any specific suggestions for people who find themselves in that situation?
Yeah. I mean, I wish I did. Honestly, it's a really tough spot to be in. I would say, particularly, I mean, the backlog, which was 600,000 reinvestigations, is now 400,000 reinvestigations. That's how far behind it is, and that's progress. The Intelligence and National Security Alliance, INSA, which you guys may be familiar with, Charlie Allen is one of our principals that heads the intelligence. I guess he's subcommittee or something. I don't know. But anyway, so he was talking to me about this and saying, look, if it was me, if I was starting out now, I would like be dual tracking my career like crazy, right? I'd be pursuing every avenue I could to get into the government and hopefully get a conditional offer and get in train, but be busting my butt like hell to get a job in the private sector because you just don't know. And at some point, like the egg timer is just going to run out, right? These things will expire, and it's a terrible position to be in, and it's frustrating. You're like, I want to serve. I'm here. I'm willing to deal with the salary and deal with the travel and put myself in harm's way. Like, why? And I've been told I'm qualified. Why can't I get this job? And it just is. Like, there's no good answer for it. It just is. Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about your reasons to leave the agency and public service and go into the private sector?
Yeah, it was gut-wrenching, really gut-wrenching. So, I mean, the short answer to the question is my wife and I got pregnant a little bit unexpectedly, and the living life overseas and taking a newborn to Islamabad was just non-tenable, and we got a lot of family pressure to sort of switch tracks. So I switched from a CO billet into a headquarters billet. So I was there for a year trying to figure out kind of what was going to be next, and I didn't go there to work at headquarters. It wasn't for me. So I looked around, and fortunately for me, Chertoff sort of snapped me up. Yeah.
Hi, thanks for your presentation. I'm a bit familiar with the Chertoff Group because Mike Sexton is my alumni mentor.
Yeah, Mike's good people.
He's been telling me a bit about it. But I know he's a cybersecurity guy, but I was wondering what skills do you find most valuable in your part of the business?
Good question. So it's really, for security services, for what we do, it's just sort of domain knowledge. Do you understand? Do you understand stuff? And we can teach you how to do it the way we do it, right? Just like, do we have to explain to you sort of how a network can connect? You know what I mean? Do we have to explain to you sort of the basic content? But there aren't any particular skills that we're looking for, other than if somebody can come in and has the ability to sell, who understands how to do business development, who has a strong network and isn't afraid to go out there and pound the pavement and bring in new business, that's always awesome. But for folks that are coming in, sort of the analysts and associates, sort of our quote-unquote junior staff, even though I hate saying it like that, it's really, do you have some content knowledge? Are you willing to learn and do it the way that we do it? And self-confidence, it's a big deal for us. I mean, I would expect you, if you're working with me, to be comfortable walking into Secretary Chertoff's office with me, and if you have a question, asking the question. I don't want shrinking violets. I want people that have confidence in their skills, confidence in their understanding of the issues, but are also willing to sort of, again, sit and learn the way we do it. Yeah.
I'm just wondering, how do you advise your clients on lone wolf terrorist attacks specifically? Because it's one thing to be talking about, these big organized attacks by ISIL, and another thing to say, we have a domestic threat, and that could be a problem for you.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that we are pretty good at this. When I mean sort of our security services are pretty good at detecting and sort of sniffing out these big attacks that have kind of vapor trails back to the Fatah and back to the Levant and so on. So I don't worry about that too much, and I tell my clients, like, we probably got that. I mean, is it possible that one could get through? Yeah, of course it's possible, but I feel pretty confident in our FBI and our intelligence services. But those are the ones that are most troublesome. Orlando being kind of foremost among them here. 59 people dead, I think 60. So we sort of say, look, if detection is going to be that difficult and that unrealistic, then it's all about sort of response and recovery, right? So we tell them to focus their attention on when something happens, how quickly, do you have a relationship with law enforcement? Can you call the sheriff? Do they know your venue? Do they know your facility? Do they know when they get there? I mean, do they have to stand outside, like in the case of Orlando, and look at the blueprints, try to figure out where the bathrooms are? Or do you have a relationship with the police? Do you have pre-staged medical kits? Do you have a shelter-in-place plan? Do you have an evacuation plan? Do you have multiple exits that are unlocked, right? Do you have the ability to move people quickly in and out of a venue when something goes wrong? And do you have armed security? So in some cases, we tell folks, given your threat profile, given where you are, where you sit, yeah, having an armed off-duty police officer in front of the venue is the right thing to do. And then the recovery piece, it's in the parlance sort of business continuity, right? Having the ability when something happens to respond quickly and get back up and running as fast as you can. So in the case of an electric utility, right? Do you have failover sites? Do you have a secondary place to sort of get the thing up and running? Do you have redundancy in the system? So if something goes down, you can sort of route around that and fix it. Because the reality is, when it comes to lone wolves with guns, this country is full of guns. Can you deal with it and respond quickly?
So since you're working with businesses as part of political risk and Chertoff Group, how necessary do you think it is to have a solid understanding of like financial markets and global economy and stuff like that?
In my part of the business, not critical, but in something I can flip back to other parts of the company. If you to work, actually, it's probably better here, right? So if you want to work in M&A advisory or private equity, yeah, it's great. We always need more people that have financial backgrounds. Turns out that something in the world has to do with the economy. Yeah. Do you have a follow-up?
It's just like, so if you're specifically working in like security services,
yeah,
not as important.
No, I don't think it's as important as, like my ideal candidate is somebody that, like strong academic credentials, right? Sort of good internships, etc. But if I have somebody who like actually has a security background that I could go send out to do a site assessment, to like look at a place and tell me what they think is wrong, like, that's awesome. But I understand that there's not a lot of people that have that out there. So I want somebody who who's understands sort of the global risk, right, environment, understands how things fit together, who pays attention to what's going on in the press, understands like how things coming out of the government affect companies, understand the global economy, yeah, all that stuff. Yeah.
Sort of related to her question, how does the Chertoff Group at all look for people with more focused like area knowledge, specific countries or regions, or is it less about that and more about I don't know how do I say it, sort of functional experience? Or?
Yeah. We don't necessarily. It's always kind of client driven, right? So like we have one of my major clients is in the UAE, so I go over to Abu Dhabi quite frequently, and so like having somebody that had a sort of strong understanding of the Gulf would be helpful, right? Like if I could take somebody with me that understood that world well, that'd be great. Are we hiring like a UAE guy? No, not necessarily, but like it depends on the client. It depends sort of what we're working on at any given time. Yeah.
Looking back at your risk assessment, do you have a process to evaluate maybe where you were wrong and why?
Yeah.
What would that be?
Yeah, not a process per se. We'll do that kind of thing once a year, and we haven't done it yet for 2017. I think folks want to see kind of how things shake out in the first 100 days after the inaugural. So yeah, we will do that again and sort of take a look at the way the world feels today as opposed to where it was a year ago. I think there's somebody who got you. Yeah.
So you said you transferred from, you said an analyst first into operations, is that correct?
Well, I had been offered an analyst job, which I didn't take, and then I ended up getting hired on the operational side.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess my question would have been, how difficult is it to transfer laterally between offices?
Yeah.
What circumstances allow or prevent that?
Yeah.
And you have to build qualifications to do that. How does that work?
So there's a process called gatewaying at CIA. I don't know. I can only speak for that agency. I don't know the rest of them. But where analysts can migrate over to the operational side. I don't know how often it happens, what the criteria is. I don't know anybody that has actually done it. I just know it exists and people have tried to do it. Presumably there's an opening, right? It's really about like kind of shuffle the deck around and there's a particular position and you're already inside as opposed to somebody coming in from the outside and folks know you, and networking inside of the agency is huge. People like spend a lot of time taking folks to coffee and building your resume internally. But I don't exactly know. Yeah.
I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to kind of the land landscape of different private sector firms that would be interested in SSP alone.
Yeah.
Where Chertoff fits in that, and you said the firm is like roughly 50 people. So I'm wondering like where that sits in kind of the landscape.
Yeah, it's a good question. So there are a lot of these sort of small, former head of agency starts company shops around DC. There's the Cohen Group, there's the Crumpton Group, there's Albright Stonebridge, which you guys are probably more familiar with than I am probably. There are, I'm gonna go blank here. What else is sort of in that? Ridge Global, is that what it's called? Tom Ridge started his own firm. There are others, and I'm sure they'll come to me as soon as I walk out the door. But they all sort of do slightly different things. Most of them do more of the like political risk consulting. You want to open up operations in Nigeria. We'll give you our thoughts on what's going on in Nigeria and how it pertains to your particular sort of your field or your sector. The stuff that we do is a little more harder security than that. We do some of that, but it's not. We're not really like, other than I talked about the airlines. Other than for the airlines, that's kind of the exception. We generally are like helping companies like protect something, as opposed to like sort of let's tell you what we think about what's going on in a particular part of the world. In terms of, all of them would be interested in SSP students, first of all. To the extent that you guys, and look, let me take another step back. How you position yourself, like how you write your resume really matters. Having a resume that's tailored toward a political risk shop, like a control risks, as opposed to a company like mine where we're consultants. We're not political risk experts. We are consultants. Like, we are brought in by big companies, Fortune 100 companies, who are like, man, we just saw what happened in Paris and what happened in Brussels. We're really terrified. Can you help us figure out what the hell we're doing on security? Right? Different than, again, we want to move into the Africa market. Give us the laydown on what's going on in the economy there, socially, politically, security-wise. So I'm happy to talk to you offline and see if I can give you some suggestions on particular firms for your particular background, but there's a ton of them. I saw the hand over here. Yeah.
So what does the day-to-day look like for the junior research people at your company? Are they sitting in front of computers, writing, doing research all that?
No, some of them are, not all of them. The folks that are on my team, we try as much as we can to get them out and to travel and sort of get to see clients. So the most of the work is either sort of on the kind of business development side, sort of writing proposals, creating sort of a capabilities briefing for the firm. Here's how what we can do is relevant for your company. So our junior folks will take kind of all the slides in the world and try to find the 5 or 6 that are most relevant to a particular business opportunity. And then on the back end, we go out, we'll do an assessment, meet with clients, do a bunch of interviews, talk to some senior executives, and come back with all these notes, right? And our junior folks will help us put together the deliverable for whatever that report is, right? So, for example, so just in this room, so this is proprietary, but I went out about 3 weeks ago and did an assessment for the. So we went to his house and went to his office and met with his family and the whole bit. So we do a lot of this kind of executive protection stuff, which I didn't mention before. So companies will hire us to do sort of an assessment, a threat assessment against their sort of opposition research, right, in the political context, against their principal, saying, okay, what is this guy's profile online? What are people saying about him in open sources and then in the kind of deep and dark web? So we'll do a bunch of deep dark web stuff. And that's sort of like piece 1, right? Here's a report, here's 3 pages on kind of what your threat profile looks like on the internet. And then we'll take a look at their travel patterns. Do they travel commercially? Do they travel private? Where do they go? Are they a recognizable face? When they travel, do they bring a security detail with them? Do they travel in armored cars, whatever? And try to give them kind of an assessment of what their whole risk picture looks like and then give a report. Okay, here are sort of the 12 things we think you need to do to go from sort of this risk profile to this risk profile. Which will bring you down. Look, we're never going to eliminate risk. And the CEO is an Indian guy. He travels to India. His family's there. He can walk into a coffee shop. The guy's a celebrity, and like he could get mauled by a mob, right? But our job is to like if you're gonna go to India, you're gonna do that because your family's there. Like, how can we help you think through how to sort of bring down that risk a little bit? Yeah.
Thanks for going through this. You mentioned a big part of what you guys do to help prioritize these risks and efforts to counter them. Have you noticed just across the board any trends in tendencies on the company's parts to misperceive the actual relationship between those risks, or to overemphasize, say, the threat of terrorism, as opposed to, are people afraid of things that they should be less afraid of?
And vice versa?
Yeah.
Yes. And companies are such varying levels of sophistication when it comes to security. So that the entertainment company I mentioned before had never had a chief security officer. They never had a security department. Most of the stuff that happened on security happened at the local level. You had a general manager of a venue who's responsible for getting the talent in the back door and getting the catering in and getting the show equipment and getting the people in the front door, making sure that everyone's safe and there aren't drugs coming into his venue. But the notion of thinking about terrorism, international terrorism as it pertains to, a rock show in whatever, in Houston, it just wasn't top of mind. So we've been trying to, after Orlando, it's a little easier to sell, right? That the events sometimes drive the discussion, but we're not in the business of trying to scare anybody. We're in the business of saying, realistically, what are the risks you face, and how can we help you mitigate them? We spend more time, because most folks when they think of security think about security cameras, right, and fences, and locks, and guards, and whatever. We spend more time talking folks out of buying things than into buying things. We're like, that's not relevant for you, and to say nothing of the fact that you don't have the infrastructure to support it. You don't have the trained people to sort of handle the technology, and so most of the time security fails with the people because they don't know what to do. I think I saw a hand over here. Yeah?
Question for you on the slide when you go back to shows your threat assessment, and then you had the slide before that. There was another company, I believe.
This one?
Yeah, the CFR. So
yeah.
They didn't mention China in there. I'm just curious.
Yeah.
What their target audience is. Obviously yours is for corporations, but what the target audience of their reports are, and basically why you think they left China out.
I don't know. I don't have a good answer for you. I mean, I know sort of no part in writing this. This is it's on their website. It's publicly available. It's sort of their interpretation of the world. This was going. And maybe this is really about sort of violence and action or outbreak of fighting, right? As opposed to sort of geostrategic, kind of diplomacy, that sort of thing. I don't know.
Yeah, they're not seeing a direct confrontation in the South China Sea, Northern Territory. I think that's what they don't see it.
Yeah. Yes?
Could you share some advice how you pick your thesis topic?
Oh my God. That was out of the blue. How I picked my thesis topic, oh geez. So I wrote about Palestinian politics. I was interested in writing about, this was 2002. Arafat was still alive. We were 7 years on from Camp David and like through the Second Intifada. And I was sort of interested I was trying to project what I expected to happen in Israel and Palestine over the next few years. That was sort of what I set out to learn about. And I did a bunch of research and sort of identified these inflection points over the years where, testing my memory, where it looked as though there would have been peace, right? And that it's sort of a change in leadership would have affected the calculation. And all these points where sort of big events happened, nothing really changed. And so I was sort of assessing like the reasons why the status quo was sort of maintained for like 25 years. I don't really remember exactly why I picked it, to be honest. I'm sorry. It was 15 years ago. I saw a hand over here. Back there, yeah. Yeah.
Hi, so I have a more broad question. One of the things that I'm interested in is the ability of states and non-state actors to use, for lack of a better term, information war to use narratives to shape the reality of the situation, so that they can, attain, serve their own interests. Right?
Like the Russians, for example.
Yeah, that's just one example. ISIS is a really popular argument, but
us.
Us, yes. But what organizations, groups, jobs out there that agencies, what exists? What kind of jobs exist out there?
Yeah, so there's sort of the obvious sort of DoD and intelligence community folks that do kind of public sector psyops. But in the private sector, there's actually more than you think. There are a bunch of communications firms. One is called Brunswick, one is called Levick. There's a couple just off the top of my head. Yeah. Yeah, that.
Rennan Group?
Rennan, yeah. That they're basically PR firms, but they get a lot deeper with their clients. So they'll focus on kind of crisis communication planning, They'll help companies try to tell their story in kind of a more effective way. And that includes kind of, search engine optimization and manipulation of social media, you know what I mean by that, of social media. And so yeah, there actually is more of that in the private sector. It's not sort of the traditional like influencing other countries, that's a public sector role, right? But in terms of working on behalf of a corporation, helping it tell its story and deal with some, sex scandals and whatever else, like, yeah, there's actually companies that do that. Yeah. So I hand over here. Yeah.
So I'm assuming, and maybe not, but I'm guessing that most of the opportunities for this type of consulting come after you've graduated, once you have a master's degree. What would you recommend doing in the meantime as far as like internship or fellowship opportunities that would help develop that skill set that's going to transfer well?
That's a hard question. So obviously any U.S. government time is good, right? U.S. government internships are great, particularly ones, to get you a clearance. You don't need a clearance to do what we do. Most of us who are from government still have them, and we're sort of active or eligible without having kind of the SCI access. But getting clearance is great if you can get one. Other than that, anything where you're writing a lot, where you have sort of a book of things you've done, right? Written articles on particular geopolitical issues, cybersecurity, physical security. That's all great. I mean, when I interview somebody, I always ask for a writing sample because I don't care how smart you are. If you can't write, I can't use you. So anything where you get to write a lot is good. And even if you can't find a job that allows for that, like finding opportunities, whether it's through the university or whatever, to sort of get out there and write and get your name out there and talk about stuff. Doesn't really matter if you're right. Doesn't really matter if you're the smartest person in the room. It just matters that you're doing it, that you're trying. And so I have a lot of respect for people that put themselves out there.
Something we have now that we didn't have when you were here is the Georgetown Security Studies Review, which is a student-run peer-reviewed journal.
That's great.
So everybody should write for that.
Yeah, we hired a girl.
Love your body of work.
We hired a girl, actually it was from St. Andrews, who started a couple of weeks ago as an intern, and yeah, the first day she got there, I just Googled her. I wanted to know who this person was, and yeah, she had 3 or 4 pieces out there that were actually quite well written. So we're already using her on some of our projects because she's clearly smart. That's right. Yeah.
So for the type of research and like threat assessments that you and other political risk type groups are making, do you find it more necessary to have like quantitative skills or qualitative skills? Like what kind of research?
Yeah, for us it's qualitative. I mean, certainly our M&A guys do the quant stuff, but for us it's qualitative. Can you scour, the internet and find what you need to find? Do you have the sort of fortitude to kind of go beyond I couldn't find it in the first 10 minutes and keep sort of hustling, right? We have a proprietary tool that we use for the deep and dark web stuff, so we can teach someone how to kind of do that, to do some of that scraping. What else? Yeah, and also slide building. I mean, PowerPoint skills are so valuable in the private sector. Like, man, somebody who can who I can be like, look, here's a horse and a pig and a cat and a stick figure of a guy with a baseball bat. Like, make it look like a cool slide. Like, I can't do that. like that's like as good as it gets for me, and I still let. So like those skills, PowerPoint skills, huge. Always good. I'll take one more if that's okay.
Yeah. So you mentioned hiring somebody from St. Andrews.
Yeah.
And so what are the opportunities for international students who obviously can't go work for the U.S. government in these types of firms?
Yeah. So not good for us. We have a facility clearance, so like we can only have U.S. citizens working for us. But lots of other kind of similar firms around town take international folks because that's not an issue for them. So again, I'm happy to make any references or connect people to other companies and stuff. Yeah. One more question? Yeah.
So working in both government and private sector, when somebody enters the government or when the government works with a group of people, for simplicity term, we've had them. In the private sector, is the Chertoff Group, or do you see this as a problem with other companies? Do you have a process to vet someone you work with, what their interests are? Have you ever had those conflicting with the company's ethics, or even 2 companies together you're working with, and you turn them down? What's your process? And is that an issue in the private sector?
Are you talking about in terms of background checks, or what are you talking about?
I would say a little bit background, but more, I'd say ethically, and as well as I'm sure you could find some Eastern European countries that might not line up with what you guys want to accomplish, but they could still use your services.
Oh, okay. You mean in terms of like potential clients? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a really good question, actually. We spend a lot of time, I'd say about half of our business is domestic and about half is overseas. We have a big client in North Africa, a big client in UAE, and we spend a bunch of time in Mexico. So it is a big deal. We're always concerned about A, are we being sort of taken for a ride? B, are we violating any sort of U.S. government ethics rules when it comes to foreign corrupt practices? So we have an outside counsel that will bring in to sort of help us think some of this stuff through when we need it. But most of the time, it kind of comes to the surface pretty quickly. You get in front of somebody, talk to them, you can figure it out quickly. Mike Chertoff is also, so he's at Covington and Burling, he's up counsel at Covington. He still has sort of an office there, so we have like Covington kind of at our disposal when we want to get some sort of outside counsel advice, which is helpful. And on that point, it's not exactly your question, but interestingly, when you're talking about security reviews or talking about companies who are worried about their protection, there's a huge liability issue if they hire an outside consultant and then don't follow your advice. If something happens, if there's a lawsuit, that looks horrible. So we actually spend a lot of our time working through law firms. So every big company has an affiliation with some big firm, right? That's like their go-to outside counsel, and we'll actually often contract through Covington and Burling or Perkins Coie or Stroud, whatever. And so they're actually the client, so that everything we do for behalf of the real client is underprivileged. So every document, every email says privileged confidential, so it's non-discoverable in the event there's some sort of lawsuit or liability issue. Yeah, which I wouldn't have thought of until I got it. Cool. Well, I'm done, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Let me, on behalf of the Security Studies Program, we want to thank. I know everybody got a lot out of this, so we really want to thank you. And we have a coin.
Cheers.
So
that's great.
Theory, practice, scholarship, and policy. And I think Jason embodied all of that today.
Oh, thank you.
Gave us lessons in every aspect. So thank you very much.
Pleasure. Thank you very much.
Be safe for the traffic tonight and tomorrow. And Saturday if you're marching.
Leave early.
Yeah.